In this lecture, we're going to look at pre-writing strategy, which will help people with literacy. And sometimes we forget that pre-writing is very important. When I observe student teachers or interns, I always see that there are warm-ups or writing prompts or bell ringers. And sometimes I'm like, okay, that's good and all, and that's a good idea to do, but have you ever thought about making them draw? And that's what this article talks about, is it's going to give you some different perspectives on how we can make someone become a better writer. In this first page right here, it discusses a scenario. It says, in the first room, children are having difficulty getting started. In the second room, the children are easily jotting down ideas. So it says, well, what's going on? Why is one classroom the students are willing to write and they're eager to learn, and in the second classroom they're not? And that's because it says that teachers are using better strategies in that classroom. Okay, well, that's fine. That's a good intro. But let's go to the meat and the heart of this article. And that says right here that one possible way to increase fluency and interest in writing is by using artistic activities to help students at the pre-writing setup. So think of our warm-ups that we have in our classrooms, and we have the students write something. How about having the students draw something? That might be good. And it says that drawings allow students to rehearse the words they want to use in their writing and remove the difficulties of spelling and vocabulary. Right here it says drawing, playing, singing, dancing can be pre-writing activities that will help someone have a better understanding what they're reading. Artistic expression helps. Our students absolutely want to get out. They want to learn more things, and they want to get into the real world, and the real world is very artistic. When you're driving down the road, you see art all the time. It's usually in road signs, car tags. There's all kinds of images that are pleasing for us. When we get in a car, we play music. When we're happy, we dance. But when we're in school, we're always bombarded with reading and writing. There's no way for students to enjoy what they're doing and to open up artistically. We watch TV, we see art. We see cartoons. We see wonderful commercials that are grabbing our attention. But when we're in schools, we do not stress students actually creating artistic work. So we can take that need for artistic work and combine it with literature to help students get ready. It says right here that structure and fluency, they need to compose and rehearse written pieces. Now this article will do several things. One is going to talk about student-created art, as well as other people's artistic works. And then the third thing it says is we're going to look at a combination. But the first two are the keys to this article. First, they're going to look at artwork that the students create that will help them in their pre-writing strategies. And the second thing they're going to look at is using other people's art to help them understand writing. This paragraph says, just another intro paragraph, visual arts and writing. It states that there uses multiple intelligences, the art and literacy, so that's good. That's what we need, and we need to definitely have that happen. It says we need to have student drawing, and that drawing is a viable and effective form of rehearsal for narrative writing and can be more successful than the traditional planning activity, discussion, writing bullets, writing outlines. Drawing can do a better job. Now, let's get to the meat of it and get past the intro. And that's where we start right here when we look at sketch to stretch. It is the best known pre-writing activity. After reading, the pupils create a sketch based on their understandings of the text. They look for themes, patterns, relationships. This sometimes is called graphic organizers. And they'll have rehearsals for discussions as to accuracy and completeness of sketch and how sketches can be improved. So the students create their sketches based on what they read. The teacher patterns it, the teacher models it, and explains it to them. So it says one of the best pre-writing activities is sketch to stretch. And that it's described as visually representing activity that moves students beyond literal comprehension to think more deeply about the character's theme and other elements of the story structure and author's craft in a story they are reading. The strategy is introduced and modeled by the teacher several times before the students work either individually or as part of a group. After reading, the pupils create a sketch based on their understanding of the text. Look for themes, patterns. Sketches serve as graphic organizers. They describe it as creative mapping. I just have a quick video where they're demonstrating this activity.
All right, today we are going to do a sketch to stretch activity. While I read a chapter to you from the book called Help! I'm Trapped in the President's Body. We've been reading about that, and if you remember, Jake is in the president's body and he's going to go do the debate, and his friends had to be kind of bribed to be quiet about the body switch. So they just got done leaving Jake's house where the president is sleeping in Jake's body. And now we're going to read and find out what they do on the way to the debate. Your job is to sketch or draw what you hear about the story as I'm reading. Think about the characters. Think about the setting. You can think about the problem, the solution, all those things that we talk about in a story. That's what you're going to be thinking about. Get your pencils or crayons ready. Here we go. Mr. President, Gail said, I mean Jake, even I protest. This is really overdoing it. Hey, I smiled. You only live once. But why this, Gail said. Because the president deserves a break today, I replied with a grin. The presidential limo was in the drive-through line at McDonald's. Let me read that again. That should be a clue for what you should be sketching. The presidential limo. Mark, you need to listen to what I'm reading and draw it. Listen to this. The presidential limo was in the drive-through line at McDonald's. But this is not the image President Fripp wishes to present, Gail argued. Look, Gail, consider yourself lucky that the president is presenting any image at all, I replied. Well, it could be worse, Andy said. We could be out skateboarding. Can you imagine the president skateboarding? Or at the arcade playing video games, Josh added. Al, the driver, pulled the limo up to the menu board. I opened the moonroof and stood up outside the moonroof. Hello, may I take your order? A voice crackled through the speaker. Josh, Andy, and I ordered quarter pounders with cheese, large fries, and shakes. How about you, Al? I ducked back in and asked the limo driver. Well, if it wouldn't be too much trouble, sir, I'd love a number 2 value meal, he said. Done, I said, then turned to J. Timothy. How about you? I wouldn't touch that garbage, J. Timothy grumbled. Well, have it your way, I shrugged and turned to Gail. Hungry? Can't believe this, Gail rolled her eyes. Hey, even the president's press secretary's gotta eat, I said. Gail grinned. Corey, make sure you're drawing because we don't leave a lot of time after we're done reading to finish your sketching. Gail grinned. Oh, well, I guess a grilled chicken sandwich and a large coffee wouldn't hurt. I finished ordering by sticking my head out the moonroof again, and then I ducked back into the limo. Al pulled around to the takeout window. A girl at McDonald's uniform leaned out the window and said, "Thank you for eating at McDonald's. Your total comes to..." Her mouth fell open and her eyes bulged, and I stood up through the moonroof. "Something wrong?" I asked. You're the President of the United States," I finished for her without a doubt. She frowned. Is this a joke?" I reached into the limo's bar and pulled out a glass with a gold and blue presidential seal on it. "Check it out." Oh, wow. She turned around and yelled to the rest of the crew, "Hey, guys, it's the President of the United States." "That's it," J. Timothy barked inside the limo. "This is a major breach of security. Al, take evasive action." "Stop," I yelled and ducked back down. "Everything's going to be okay, Al. Don't move." I turned to J. Timothy. "You really could have a little more faith. They're just regular kids. It's not like everybody wants to get the president." J. Timothy crossed his arms and slouched down in his seat with a sour look on his face. Meanwhile, a crew of kids wearing McDonald's uniforms crowded around the takeout window, holding out napkins and Happy Meal boxes for the president's autograph. "Well, can I ask you guys some questions?" I asked as I signed the stuff. "Sure, anything." "You like working here?" I asked. "Yeah, it's okay," said one. "A lot of my friends can't find work anywhere," said another. We opened our bags and dug into the quarter pounders and fries. As that unique McDonald's started to think about the kind of stuff the president could do. Maybe he really could change the world and make things better. Maybe being president could be kind of cool after all. Sitting across from me, J. Timothy pointed at the briefing books. "Now that you've had your fun, do you think you might be able to start preparing for the debate?" "Hey," I said with a mouthful of fries. "If you paid attention, you'd all know I already started." That's the end of that chapter, where they were driving through the McDonald's drive-thru. Awesome. I'll give you 1 minute to finish up the details on your picture, and then you can bring them to the floor to share. When you're done, you may come sit on the floor.
Here is the president of the car, and this is the car that he drives, and this is the high school. And this part right here, that's the emergency exit.
Wonderful.
That's what I have.
Great, Logan.
Alyssa. Here. How can I do that?
You can just sit down and be a good listener.
That's the sign for the comments. That's the sign for the donuts that's on the place.
A little louder, Tyler.
That's the limousine, and that's the window. And that's the girl.
And that's the girl
Handing the stuff.
that works at McDonald's? Good. Very good, Tyler. Tyler, can I have your paper?
This is the M for McDonald's, and this is the slide. That's the tables, and that's the chairs.
Great. Where's the drive-through window?
Oh
Is it off to the side out of your picture? We talk about drawing things that way. All right. Very well done. Thank you, Miss Alyssa.
They went inside. That's
Oh.
what she drew. And they went into the playroom.
Yeah,
I'll
Don't worry about it. Okay, Ariana, thank you for being such a good listener. Jordan, if you'll step over, thank you. Okay, Miss Katie, nice and loud.
This is the people, and this is the carpenters. The people sticking out of it.
Okay, I see the first people you said were the workers at McDonald's, and the second people are sticking out of the car. So that must be Jake and his friends sticking out of the moonroof, pulling into McDonald's drive-thru. And that's the presidential limo. Well done, Miss Katie. Thank you.
Dogs and Andy sticking their heads out the window, and that's Jake in the president's body, and that's the driver Al, and this is the sidewalk, and this is the road.
Very well done.
This is the limousine. This is Jake sticking his head out of the limousine. This is McDonald's, and this is the driver. And this is a tree. But I didn't get it finished the rest of it.
What else would you, oh, you were going to do more trees? I like how you have the McDonald's drive-thru curving, because a lot of the McDonald's I've been through, the drive-thru does curve around the McDonald's. Awesome. Very well done.
This is the limousine. This is the street. And this
Corey,
is
back up.
the McDonald's person taking their order. And this is all, these are the people that are coming to get the president's autographs.
Very good details on that. You were listening with a great ear and thinking about the characters and the setting. Good for you. Nice.
All the kids sticking out the limousine. I don't remember his name was Jake. No.
The limo driver?
Yeah.
Al.
And that's the sign, the road, and the limousine, and the lights.
On the lights on the limo? Okay, good.
Where's the lights? Right there. This is the girl from McDonald's. This is the sky, and this is the sun. This is Jake. This is the limo, and this is the road. And these are the doors.
What's in the hands of the McDonald's worker?
The bag for that they ordered.
Oh, their bag of food. Can you hold it up so I can see it? Very well done. Good details.
I messed up. Where'd you
It looks great.
What part did you mess up?
The second activity, which also follows in line with the student-created artwork, which will help their literacy, is called image making within the writing process. This, instead of the students doing it pre-writing, they're doing it pre-writing while building their activity, which will be their essay. Children are exposed to a series of art explorations using various techniques and materials. They create a portfolio of hand-painted, textured papers. They examine their abstract art papers and they find images. They rehearse it. They cut out the images from their textured papers, and then they orally describe what they are doing. Once students are satisfied with their stories, they paste down their images and they begin to write. The pictures which they did in pre-writing serves as a reminder of the words that they had created in their mind, and this allows them to create a better and more enhanced story plot, which services them into a better essay. So they're using the pictures to brainstorm, and then they're using the pictures to help write, which creates mental cues. I'm going to show you a video now called Image Making.
Hungry Cups, written and illustrated by Kelsey Price. Tidal Wave, written and illustrated by Christopher Conti. The Pups Rescue, written and illustrated by Jared St. Ange. The Bear's Terrible Night, written and illustrated by Chelsea Lash. One bitter winter night, a mama bear gives birth to two baby cubs. The mama bear is sleeping and doesn't know that she gave birth to two baby cubs. Later on, the mama bear sees her newborn babies and tries to move over without waking up her babies. On a cool morning, a blue whale is floating on the surface to get some air. He is swimming through the water and swishing in the nice, cool, cold ocean. One windy summer night, a fox pup wandered away from his den in a tree trunk on the edge of the forest. As he sniffed the air, he heard a rock fall. He started to shiver. He felt scared. When I was reading my story to the class, I was really thinking really hard, and the pictures came out of my mind, and then they just acted what I was reading. That's how I became a written and illustrator.
One clear, calm sunrise, a snow leopard was looking for food. It picks up the scent of a herd of blue sheep. The snow leopard follows the scent. I worked really hard on him, and if there was something I didn't like, I tried again. And then if that wasn't good, I tried again. I kept on trying until I got it exactly how I wanted it.
When the summer sun rose over the emerald meadow, 2 hungry bear cubs wandered off in search of some wild plum berries and some insects to eat. The picture sort of gave you all the right ideas to put into the sentence. It sort of gave it a little bit more pizzazz to it.
One calm, sunny day, the koalas searched the grassy lands of Australia to find a tree with lots of leaves. The koala climbed the tree, watching the golden sunset.
The words. I just made them sound like they were with the picture, and it came out as a really good book.
Picturing writing, fostering literacy through art. And image making within the writing process are 2 innovative art and literature-based approaches to writing, designed to meet the needs of students with diverse learning styles. Developed by Beth Olshansky at the University of New Hampshire, these dynamic models provide a comprehensive alternative approach to teaching writing that supports all students in the acquisition of essential literacy skills. These systematic, art-infused methods for teaching writing are easily integrated into the curriculum across grade levels.
The tiny brown dots are what he eats. The tiny shrimp called krill.
We're going to learn a lot about whales from Chris, aren't we?
They allow teachers to teach the state standards and address district-wide curriculum while meeting the needs of the diverse learners within their classroom community.
What's your snow leopard's problem?
Oh, the problem was he found the blue sheep, only it belonged to a farmer.
What's the solution?
The solution.
As students engage in authentic learning experiences, reading, writing, listening, and speaking are seamlessly woven together with their art. Picturing writing and image making have proven their effectiveness in improving student writing as well as reading, particularly for those at risk.
And leaped over the mud so that the hunter couldn't see the footprints.
I like it because everybody in my class got a award for doing a nice job.
Picturing writing consists of a carefully designed progression of literature, art, and writing mini-lessons that utilize simple crayon-resist art processes as a tool for developing, recording, and expressing ideas. Most students are comfortable working with crayons, and when a simple watercolor wash is applied, the result is quite pleasing. Students are encouraged to add visual detail to their pictures, which in turn increases their thinking and use of descriptive language.
Gradually, the sky started darkening. Then a cold wind tickled through the bear's fur. She began feeling chilly. After a while, an early snow started falling softly. Then a blustery wind whipped through the black bear's fur. After that, a blizzard hit.
Image making within the writing process offers a collage-based approach to writing that utilizes hand-painted textured papers made by each student. These colorful and captivating paper texturing techniques are guaranteed to engage reluctant writers and struggling readers. Once students' portfolios are complete, these hand-painted textured papers become the raw materials for literally constructing story or inspiring poetry. The image-making collage process is unique in that it offers both visual and kinesthetic tools to support the acquisition of essential literacy skills. As students move cut and torn shapes freely on each page, they are able to rehearse, draft, and revise their stories before ever putting pencil to paper.
Panther's not really good at running because he's only a little kid. He's only a little baby.
Together, picturing writing and image making offer a comprehensive, systematic, and rich learning experience that supports the literacy learning of all students throughout the school year.
I thought I couldn't read this book, but then when I started practicing at home, I could read it. At first, when you said that we were going to make books, I thought that I wasn't going to be able to do it, but when I started trying, I believed in myself and I thought that it was very easy.
Picturing writing and image making are facilitated within Artist Writers Workshop. Designed to establish a democratic learning environment, Artist Writers Workshop broadens the concept of writing workshop to include a strong visual and kinesthetic component.
When I made the first picture, it was seen as the animals were alive and they're helping me get along.
Removing the verbocentric bias of more traditional approaches to language arts, words and pictures are treated as equal and complementary languages for learning. Students are defined not only as authors but also as artists and are given the task of creating their own quality picture books. They learn how to read their pictures to access detail and description.
And it looks like it's reflecting.
Almost like the rays of the sun are coming through the clouds, yes.
That video touched on the element of a artist workshop, and that's what Activity 3 talks about. It was originally created by an English teacher in Texas who, because of budget cuts, she became an art teacher. So she took her art teaching that she was learning how to teach and brought in English as well. So what she decided to do was have students create and have a sketchbook, and throughout the semester they would write notes and they would make drawings, and students' writing served as a background notes to help them remember what they wanted to do and where they were on their projects. So an idea of the lesson was lessons began with information on artists because she was an art teacher, their work and artistic techniques. And often the stories, because she was an English teacher at heart, were read and the connections between the text and the illustrations were discussed. Well, to make the students learn better, the students were encouraged to use notebooks to record processes and discoveries that they were doing in the art class, and to sketch plans, emotions, and interesting images. So she connected the two worlds. They responded more on their own, they found. They were using their sketchbook throughout the semester, even when the teacher was not asking them. She also then started having them have daily notes that they wrote in their sketchbook to reflect on the previous day's learnings, and doing this daily gave students a record of progress throughout the year by creating their own portfolio that they have with their drawing. In the fourth activity, student readers may sometimes have trouble visualizing what they read. So I thought this was very interesting. And what they did was the students would read a chapter in a book and then they would have drawings at the end. So you could teach this in history class or any class. Like for example, you could discuss trench warfare in World War I and then have the students draw a trench system. You could teach Grapes of Wrath and have the students draw the Dust Bowl. So you would actually have students draw after they learn something. Students reported the pictures helped remember material and served as a review. The sketches and the chapter summary paragraphs made it easier to complete summaries at the end of the book. And activity. So what I want to do now is I want to show you a video on text graffiti, so you can see how sometimes that can help teaching as well.
The text graffiti method is a pre-reading activity that allows teachers to use in the classroom before reading a short story. The purpose of using text graffiti is to activate students' prior knowledge. So I want to know what the students know before they read a story. It can connect to students' lives. It can help them to look at certain words because words are very powerful in stories. So it sets up the story for them. We're going to be doing an activity today called text graffiti. Okay, text graffiti. It is a pre-reading activity. We are going to eventually read a short story, but I'm not going to tell you the title of the short story, okay? You are only going to get a glimpse into what the story is about. Each person has a different quote. These quotes are taken directly from the story, okay? You are going to read the quote to yourself, so I'm going to give you about 8 minutes. And as you read the quote, you are going to do what is called text graffiti. You're going to write all over this paper. You can draw a picture. You can circle words that stand out, because we just learned about words, and we know that words are very powerful. One single word can have a lot of meaning. Okay, you are going to make a judgment. You can make a prediction based off of what the quote is saying. Maybe your quote is talking about a specific character that's from the story, and you're going to learn something about the character based off of the details and description. So you can say, I predict that this character is going through a lot, or actually, I can relate to this character based off of what this quote is saying, okay? Maybe you want to just make an interpretation. This quote reminds me of, or this quote means this to me. Okay, so let me give you an example of one that I already did. It's important for a teacher to do a think aloud and model the assignment for students so that students are not lost. So essentially, I modeled the activity for them, the text graffiti. I read the quote to them, and then I just did a think aloud as to what I saw and what I would do in this instance. So I circled certain words, I highlighted phrases that stood out to me, and I made connections to myself by saying, I can relate to this, this is a prediction for what's going to happen next, and so forth. You are going to interpret what is the meaning, what is going to happen next, what is this whole story really about, just based off of your phrase. I'm going to give you 8 minutes. Music will be playing in the background. When the music stops, you know we're ready to move on to the next step. Thumbs up if you understand. All right, please get started. So the story that I chose in particular is called Lamb to the Slaughter. And it's essentially about betrayal and trust that was broken. Students usually, when it comes to theme, students struggle with figuring out the author's message. They struggle with finding evidence and looking at details. And I believe that it's really important for us as teachers to teach them that theme is everywhere. It's in our lives, it's in movies, it's in songs, it's in poems. It's in our experiences. There's theme everywhere. They just don't know how to dissect it. And I'm trying to teach them to break down information, look at words, look at characters' motivations, actions, look at the setting. That sets up a theme. You can look at the conflict. So now we're going to share, okay, with our group members. So I'm going to give you guys about 4 minutes for that. So one at a time, focus at your table only.
So my quote was, "The axe forgets, but the tree remembers." And I believe that the axe symbolizes who dealt the harm, and the tree represents a victim, or the one who was damaged. The axe feels guiltless of its actions and pushes what it did behind effortlessly. And the harm given to the tree was too much for it to let go, and they were scarred. Or they could be holding a grudge. And I drew a picture of someone who represents the axe, who's turning away from, they're both turning away from each other, but one is smiling and not remembering and not caring that what they did, and this person over here has a scar on them, and they're frowning and turning away from the person who did the damage as well. And I can relate to the tree because I can never really forget what happens to me and what impacts me the most. Whether it doesn't matter who did it to me, but sometimes I just can't let it go.
Now that you've heard a couple of different analysis interpretations of different quotes, okay, you are going to write to me, what do you think the theme of the story is? So the central idea. What do you think the problem is? We know it has to do with trust and betrayal and taking a bullet for someone, okay? And then after, so this will be for homework, just write a summary of what you think the whole story is going to be about, okay? You may clean up. Thank you. Students enjoy this pre-reading activity because it gives them a voice. A lot of students like to give their opinion, and I feel that as teachers we don't do that enough. And this just allows us to activate their prior knowledge, experiences in their lives that they can share with other people. And most students love to share about themselves.
Back to Texas again, we see a school teacher named Alejandro was concerned that her school was focusing more on the state test in writing and preparing people for writing mastery. We see that sometimes in Mississippi. However, she said, look, I'm not going to sit here and just teach people about writing over and over and over again. Let's actually make this fun. So what she did was she used writing prompts, which were pictures, posters, and other reproductions of great works of art. And she prompted the idea that every picture tells a story. So she showed the class a picture and said, okay, look at this one person, and I want you to make up a story about the character. Look how this person's acting. What do you think about their life? And the students discussed their ideas and wrote stories about the characters. After observing various pictures with various emotions, by the time spring came around, the students were able to select 4 pictures and use them in one story. And the resulting narratives were rich and complex. And despite not following the usual test preparation program, 88% of our students achieved writing mastery, up from 38%, or up from, the previous years. That's amazing, because the students were writing on stuff that they were looking at pictures, doing pre-writing, getting ideas, and saying, I want to write about this. I want to make this meaningful to me. The next one is a little bit on that same scale, and that's photo essays. So you see we're shifting away from student-created pictures, and we're looking at actual art that someone else has already done, and the students are taking writing prompts from that. Photo essays where students take pictures or just take pictures from the internet, and they create storyboards from it, and stories, include writing, and get a thematic, organized story that is storyboarded. There's all kinds of photo essays now. I'm going to show you a photo essay on the Civil Rights Movement, which will show you pictures and text that someone has created. The last activity that they talk about, which uses photos that someone else has created, where students researched a historical event by looking through original documents. And the students looked at pictures and they made slides, and once they were hooked on the pictures, students began to read text as well as pictures to learn more. So you use the pictures that someone else has created to examine that, then that ushers you into reading more about that. I'm going to show you a video on the Little Rock integration, where this author walked into the Little Rock school years after it was integrated, saw a picture and said, wow, I need to learn more about this one. He started writing and ended up writing a book on a picture he saw.
Early in the morning of September 4th, 1957, two 15-year-old girls in Little Rock, Arkansas dressed for school. Elizabeth Eckford put on a skirt that her older sister Anna and she had made just for this day. She could just as easily have been going to church, and in a way she was, because for Elizabeth, learning was much more meaningful and useful than prayer. A few miles away, in a house much like Elizabeth's but in an all-white neighborhood, Hazel Bryant selected something very different to put on. She wasn't signaling the start of an earnest new undertaking. School was no particularly big deal for her, so much as making a fashion statement. She wanted to look chic and sexy, someone the boys might notice. Two girls, one black, one white, born less than 4 months apart and living only a few miles from one another, each about to begin 11th grade at Little Rock Central High School. The night before, which was literally the eve of the desegregation era in large southern cities, the last-minute plan was for the 9 black students to assemble at the home of the head of the local NAACP and be escorted to Central that day. The black leaders had called most of the students' families and told them. But the Eckfords did not have a phone. Elizabeth had been forgotten and proceeded to school alone. Lots of white people lined Park Street as Elizabeth headed toward the school. For all the turmoil she felt inside, outwardly she appeared calm. Her sunglasses made her look all the more impassive. One could not look into her eyes, which would have betrayed her sadness and her fear. 3 young girls, barely into their teens, fell in directly behind Elizabeth. Hazel Bryan was one of them. She looked livid, her face poisoned with hate. In the first several shots that a local newspaper photographer, Will Counts, took that day, Hazel was directly behind Elizabeth, either partially or completely obscured. Only when Elizabeth turned slightly to her left was Hazel revealed, and at that point she merely glowered. But as Elizabeth walked forward, toward the edge of the frame, slightly out of focus, her expression almost impossible to discern, Hazel came fully into range, directly into the ground glass center of Counts' camera. Her eyes narrowed, her brow furrowed, her teeth clenched, and at that very instant she screamed. From that moment on, for the next 55 years, the lives of Elizabeth and Hazel would be inextricably bound. Within hours of the episode at Central, Elizabeth would be all over the front page of the Arkansas Democrat. Within days, the picture and another very much like it had appeared throughout the world. Elizabeth, one observer noted, had become probably the most widely known high school student in the whole United States. But when it comes right down to it, the famous photograph of Elizabeth Eckford is really more of Hazel Bryan. The eye is drawn to her mouth, twisted in rage. In the universe created by that photograph, Hazel appeared in a sense every bit as alone as Elizabeth. In fact, even segregationist leaders quickly fled from Hazel. She'd given bigotry a bad name. The photograph became an incendiary force, prompting commentary from media and celebrities alike. In poured hundreds of letters responding to the plight of one young girl just trying to go to school. The story it presented was politically charged, to say the least. The shy Elizabeth would be surprised and uncomfortable to see her name, likeness, and story related in the headlines, and she tried her best to forget it all. But Hazel didn't have that luxury. She instantly became the embodiment of racial hatred, an image which she attempted to shed, at least for herself. One night in the early 1960s, when she was around 20 years old, Hazel, by now the mother of 2 young boys, found herself lying awake, thinking about Elizabeth and about her own legacy. She was suddenly seized with an idea, one she didn't discuss even with her husband or her pastor or anyone else. She would track down Elizabeth, then call her and apologize. I was in Little Rock working on another story for Vanity Fair, and I walked into the Central High School Visitors Center, and there was this poster of Elizabeth and Hazel as grown women smiling at one another. And of course, I had known the original picture, and I tried to imagine how they had gone from the first picture to the second picture. It was literally unimaginable for me. One of the great privileges in doing this book was how much I ended up admiring both of them. I think they're both remarkable women, and it was really a privilege to get to know each of them. I want this book to be an honest acknowledgement of the racial sensitivities that persist in this country, and how, when it comes to race relations in America, everything is very complex, and there are no simple endings, and there are not necessarily any happy endings. It's an ongoing process, and the relationship between Elizabeth and Hazel is like a metaphor for America's racial history. It's really a reflection of how much more work in this country blacks and whites have to do.
If you ever get a chance to read that book, it is quite amazing. It talks about two different paths that people take that bring back and to unite them, and how hate can overcome. Another example you can look at is this one from when skyscrapers were being built, and they take one picture and then you hear the story behind the picture.
They're the unknown workers. They're the unsung heroes of construction. Their attitude, I think their casualness, the indifference to the risk that they're taking is what separates the photograph. If you see the picture once, you never forget it. This photograph, which is known around the world, shows 11 men sitting on a beam about 800 feet above the city of New York. You can see Central Park in the background, see buildings below, and they're casually sitting there, one right next to the other, eating their lunch. And they're all construction workers, and they came from all over the world. There are Irishmen, there are Mohawk Indians. It's a mixed bag of people, and they're all working in 1931-32. The image first appeared in the New York Herald Tribune on October 2nd, 1932. The Herald Tribune was a major New York publication, and I think that generated an enormous amount of excitement about what was going on. They were getting as much publicity as they possibly could in any office that was rented, whether you were a dentist or a hairdresser or a major corporation, they would get you into the news. Rockefeller put 250,000 people to work in the middle of the Depression. There were truckers, there were people in quarries, people making windows, different kinds of people, but it really made a serious effect on the economy. And that was the attitude, very, very positive towards the future, very positive towards America, very positive towards business. The funniest part about the photographs were they were done for publicity. So you'll have stunts, like this fellow Joseph McCloskey holding a flag up that seems to be attached to the top of the Empire State Building. The other pictures also show men riding the final block of stone up, going to celebrate putting the last stone in place. We do have a photograph taken the same day, and what I call the hats off picture shows them looking at the camera and saying, "Look at us." They're so proud of themselves. You know, there's a real sense of pride and accomplishment. And I think that's also what all the pictures show, the pride the guys had in their work. There are a couple of photographers who were present that day: William Leftwich, Charles Ebbets, and Thomas Kelly, who had to have a death wish. And they would have on their back a leather container that contained the glass plates, and they would actually switch them out. I think that they like to show off next to the construction workers. Well, you guys walk these beams, but so can we. We take risks too. The question of the names of all these men comes up frequently. Who are these men? Because on the back of the photograph, they're not identified. We have people who have claimed that they're their uncle or their relative, but most of them are either good guesses or plain guesses. I think it's kind of sad that they're not recognized, because everybody else gets a credit, and yet the people who actually have built the building are forgotten. The fact that they are immortalized in this picture, and they are the guys who risked their lives building this building. And I think that's what's important about the picture, is that it places them in history as being important in the development of New York City and Rockefeller Center, and gives a great deal of credit to a group that basically goes uncredited.
The authors now include two things that they call R activities, and they're okay to read. It talks about activities celebrating A.A. Milne and the Harlem Renaissance. You can read this as well. I'll include this article in the lecture. But what I really like about this article is it does two things, and I've stressed this so I don't have to, keep hitting this. But from this point right here, we're going to talk about two different types of pre-writing and literacy enhancement. The first is when the students make their own drawings and use those to help literacy. And the second is, and it kind of just segues into it, is when the students use someone else's drawings to help their literacy. So you have two different approaches. This can be done by any teacher in any subject. And I think literacy is very important, but we need to get away from the idea that students just need to have a writing prompt and then they write. Some students love to draw. Some students just love it. Like I can tell my son or my daughter, I'll say, hey, write your grandmother a letter. And they'll write one, but if I say draw them a card, they will run to go do that. A lot of people enjoy drawing and looking at pictures and going from there. And from that, we can have good writing and literacy prompts. So I hope you learned something from this lecture, and thank you for listening.